So in this segment, we're going to be discussing the Tories absolutely face-planting when it comes to the issue of the delays at Dover. We all know it's a Brexit problem. It's down to freedom of movement. I'm going to do like a Labour version of this video, probably coming out the next day, because they've said some absolute nonsense. But we'll focus on the Tories because they're the ones in power and they're the ones that have caused this mess. So this is what Braverman said.
Busy periods. No, I don't think that's fair to say this has been, an adverse effect of Brexit.
And you got the CEO of the Port of Dover. He says that it's down to Brexit. It's down to the passport checks. It's just the audio on this one's really loud compared to this one. But you've got actual people who know way more about this stuff. Simon Calder going on the BBC and telling the BBC the truth to the point where the BBC amended their articles around the delays at Dover because they never mentioned anything about passports or Brexit, but they amended the articles, which we'll look at in a bit.
We must talk about Dover. We've seen these up to 70 lorries, I think, backed up, and there are delays now for this Easter getaway weekend, because although Easter's next week, the holidays pretty much starting now for many families and schools.
Yeah, OK, this is specifically about coaches, and it's been an absolutely awful night, as we've been hearing from your reporter. People have been there for many, many hours, and it's not going to clear very quickly. The Port of Dover is now saying very specifically this is due to delays with border control. Now, at Dover, coaches are kind of taken to one side. Since Brexit, we have asked to have our passports minutely examined and to have them stamped.
So there's the key there. We've asked them to have them stamped. So all the kids have to get off the coaches. And it won't just be kids on coaches. That's, there's a lot of school trips going out. This is the first one really since the pandemic where you have a lot more, I think, schools confident about going on school trips and things like that. And so what that means is a lot more bookings, a lot more kids going out, and a lot more kids suffering. I think, you really don't want a bunch of kids stuck on a coach all day, because they will go insane. Dealing with a couple of kids is a nightmare. Dealing with a classroom of kids is dystopia. So the situation is that each passport has to get checked, and that's what Simon Calder points out. Each one has to be checked and stamped, regardless of if they're kids or adults. If they're not EU citizens, this is what happens. This is the nature of being a third country.
As a result of that, checks take longer. If you've got 50 university students or school kids on a coach, that's going to take a lot of time. And unfortunately, we seem to have this surge of coaches converging on Dover for the first time since after COVID, since after Brexit, and it's just got out of control. It will clear gradually, I think, during the day, and in future, I think we will have a kind of managed system, but absolutely miserable for people. And this is even without the entry-exit system, which is possibly going to come in at the end of the year, where you'll have to have everyone fingerprinted and have their facial biometric taken as well. Goodness.
That's going to be even worse, and you can hear the report there.
So it's going to get worse.
It's going to get worse, and there's not much the British government or even the French government can do, because the Port of Dover is quite small. It's not a huge port, and there's not a lot of room for expansion. The French did ask us a couple of years ago, do they want to put some more money in and get more kind of French border staff and expand the port booths? The British government said no, or no. And this is a situation where you can't fix the issue, but you can try and help out the problem. Maybe you can organise things better with the coach systems and things like that. But the problem is, the Port of Dover is small. It's an integral crossing for going from the UK to France, and the situation is that there's no fix for it. Without freedom of movement, there is no fix for it, and that's something where the British people and the government and the Labour Party have to accept that. It's down to that. You've got officials, this is from the BBC, officials explaining that long-term border processing times were partly to blame for delays combined with bad weather cited by ferry companies. And every March, every time we have some sort of ferry problem, it's always bad weather affecting specifically Dover. And on the way back, when all these coaches come back and a lot of people's holidays end, it's always bad weather at the Calais crossing as well. Or we blame the French at that point. But this isn't the French people's fault. This isn't the fault of the people manning the booths by the border, because they're doing exceptional work. I think they're averaging about 2 minutes per car, when really it could take longer. I think the British border forces in France average, I think, 3 or 4 minutes. So it's not down to the French there, it's down to the decisions we made, be it Brexit and the further decisions on top of that. An EU border at Dover meant that they were gumming up as each individual passport had to be inspected and stamped after Brexit. That's the BBC citing Simon Calder. And obviously, there isn't really an EU border at Dover. It's just, the borders are juxtaposed. So they have British border officials in Calais and they have French border officials in Dover, just to make the port system a lot easier. Delays have been compounded by coachload of passengers needed to disembark to have their passports checked. And, you've got to imagine when the fingerprint system and the photo thing comes in play, it's going to be a lot worse. You've got this from a Tory MP. This is this is Robert Buckland. Just absolutely struggling here.
It does seem that there's a confluence of issues. I think that there's no doubt that some of the increased checks that now are necessary since we left the EU will be a part of that. I think that all the authorities on both sides of the channel, both the French and the British authorities, have to work even harder to make sure that those short straits are working as effectively as possible at times of maximum pressure. It should be no surprise to anybody that we've hit the Easter holiday season. We're going to have lots of school parties, we're going to have lots of families wanting to travel, and it does seem to me to be somewhat of a problem here. That
it's going to happen every Easter. Essentially, that's what's going to happen. And he's struggling to give a proper answer here, but it's going to happen every Easter because there's a load of school trips and a load of people who go on break to France, and they typically go via the ferries just because it's easier and you can keep your car. So if you want to go there for a week, you can drive around France. Or you can drive to wherever you're going. You might be going to Spain, for example, or Portugal or Germany, wherever you want to go. People prefer to have their car for whatever reason, and so what that means is they go by ferry, so you can keep access to your car. And the easiest way to get from the UK to France is the Dover-Calais crossing. And so we're going to see this every year. It's going to be the annual Brexit pile-up, effectively. We're going to see this at Easter, and I think during the summer. Easter's worse because Easter's more of a fixed break. That's one of the main issues. You got this from the MP, Natalie, something I can't remember how to pronounce her second name, it's not important, saying, incredibly disappointing to see French border control problems once again adding to traffic mayhem just as families are trying to get away for the Easter holidays. And, this is the MP for Dover, absolutely clueless, turned off replies because she was getting roasted, and I guarantee she was getting roasted in the tweets. And this is, this is the situation where you had British ministers celebrating the end of freedom of movement.
We bring an end to free movement. An end to free movement. Free movement will end.
End free movement. To end the free movement of people once and for all.
It was never, ever built with the idea that anybody would be wanting to have serious hard border from the European Union there, but that was what, with a democratic vote in 2016, we asked for.
And that's the key. We asked for this, and no one envisioned really leaving the EU. I think when the border facilities were set up, it was with the idea that free movement would always stay, and you've got ministers who celebrate the end of freedom of movement, and look at where we are now. Constant pile-ups. You have kids, that are going on holiday that are suffering in coaches. Fair enough, not the worst place to be, seeing as you're on the way to France and you get a holiday, but it's just not ideal for anyone to be in this situation.
And the government has negotiated for us to become third country citizens, which effectively means that, yes, we are obliged to have our passports checked and stamped. That never used to happen. You will recall that, it used to be the case you just waved the passports out the window and you'd be sent on your way by a smiling French official. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. And so everybody on those coaches, and we've got dozens of them, has to have their passport examined and stamped. We signed up for that. And I tell you what, Matt, it's going to get an awful lot worse.
He cites, he talks about the biometric checks. I think it's not the video. He kind of showed off his passport and said, you've got to get these pages stamped and things like that. And that's what happens. That's what happens to your third country. You have your passport stamped. They check your passport to make sure you haven't overstayed the 90 days. Then they put the stamp in for the date, and then once you're on your way out, they will re-stamp it again, go through the same checks. You've got Braverman, so thousands queue at Dover for second day as Braverman accused of denial. This situation where, Braverman saying it's not down to Brexit, and people telling you, well, there's a goddamn problem here, and, you can blame the French all you want, but this situation will happen on the other side in Calais as well in a couple of weeks' time, and they're going to probably blame the French again, because our ministers they know they can get away with brazen lies. And what I want to see these people held accountable. I want to see all of these politicians held accountable for their actions, and their lies called out. This is the reaction I want them to have after they get called out.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
That's what I want to see.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
And what I mean by that is absolutely just their arguments torn apart, completely torn apart. That's what I want to see, decimated, destroyed. Because at the end of the day, we know this is down to Brexit, and for anyone to say make Brexit work and all of this other nonsense, you cannot fix the border problems without freedom of movement, because the processing time, that's the problem. You can add more booths, you can add more staff, but at the end of the day, it won't fix the fundamental problem of tons of coaches. I mean, look at the amount of people going through. If you look at the coaches, when you look at the amount of coaches, if you increase the staff by, say, 4 people, right, because there's only a limit on the amount of booths you can add. If you add another 4, even 6 booths, right, it will help. But, it's not going to resolve this issue right here. You can add more staff, yes, that is going to help. It will improve processing times. But the issue is these are tons, you have, tens, maybe hundreds of coaches going via the Dover-Calais crossing. The issue is that the processing time, it takes around 2.5 minutes to check each passport. You've got coaches full of 50 people, 30 people. That's all going to take time. So, for the Tories to use their nonsense arguments of this isn't Brexit, it's just nonsense, and for the Labour Party, which we'll talk about in a separate video, to say make Brexit work is just beyond me. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And, yeah.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
I'll catch you in the next one.